Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy, a Goody Nation podcast. My name is Casey, and we are thrilled to be with you again today to talk about relationship building and the importance of building authentic, genuine relationships in the innovation space. As you know, Goody Nation is an organization that exists to bridge the relationship gap for so many deserving founders in the social entrepreneurship space, founders from various backgrounds who may not always have access to the opportunities that they need in order to scale their ventures. And so that's why relationship building is so important to us. We like to find out from the dope people in our network how relationship building has influenced their career trajectory. And so today, we have a very special guest. We have Sergio, aka Serge. I was given permission to call him that. But
Yes, please do.
Serge is going to tell us a little bit about the journey to co-founding Next Shift Learning. Is one of our amazing companies that is a part of the Goody Nation ecosystem. And so I just want to welcome you today to the podcast.
Hey, Casey, good to connect with you. I'm so excited to
Yay.
be on today.
Of course, of course. And so the classic Goody Nation question, we would love to know, what is your origin story? How did you start out on the path where you are right now?
Yeah. So I'm going to take this question into two parts. Part one is to talk about my personal origin story. And then part two is like the origin story of Next Shift Learning. So I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, came to the States when I was 6 months old. My mom and my dad both immigrated to this country. My dad came here when he was 17 years old, and my mother followed right after. Both of them really emphasize the importance of education, but as a first gen low income kid, I didn't really understand what it meant to go to college because neither of my parents went to college. Actually, my dad um, didn't really finish middle school, and my mom technically got her GED 3 months before I graduated. And so, um, one of the things that I have realized is that the only way for me to truly navigate in my earlier days was like connecting and talking to people around like, what do you do for a living? How did you get there? And then figuring out, well, what do I mimic or try and do? Because there's no one that can really point to a path that I'm able to take. And so, even at a younger age, my dad, who worked at this country club, he's been running this coffee shop for like almost 20 years. He's still working there today. Would constantly give me business cards. And these are folks that are wealthy and retired, who have gone to prestigious schools, state schools, like schools in other parts of the world, with a variety of different careers. And I remember he would say, Mijo, here's a business card from so and so. I was like, I think you should set up a call. And I did, for not all of the business cards. My dad did a lot of networking on my behalf in his really humble but just like amazing way. But it was really helpful. Sometimes I would get to go visit in these homes, and these homes look radically different than mine. I remember hearing about schools that I thought were on the West Coast, but they're actually on the East Coast. So like, Harvard, Yale, like I had no idea where these schools were. I thought UCLA was like 3.5 hours away. Like there was just so many things I just didn't know. But it was through my dad who like ended up helping me connect me right to folks that might be able to guide his son to figure out what is next after high school. And my mom, similarly in her own path, like actually spoke a lot with guidance counselors, right? Or would talk to her friends who had older kids with students, and so she was like, "Always watch out for this," and like, I heard this from my friend so and so, and so I learned the value of relationship building. And later on, when I went to college, I realized, oh, this is a social capital gap that I just didn't have. But inadvertently, my parents learned to like bridge in their own ways that gap just by talking to their immediate friends or people they worked with, just to be able to allow me the opportunity to figure out, where do we go from here? So I'm gonna stop there. That's like the personal origin question, Casey. I don't know if you have any other questions for me, or if I'm gonna
No,
jump into something else.
I'm just first of all, shout out to mom and dad for being the wingman and wing woman of
Yes.
bringing the relationship building. That's amazing. And so yes, I would love for you to continue down this path. So this is you being exposed to different people and different opportunities and hearing about different, potential opportunities for you to pursue. And so yes, how did that all lead to next shift learning?
Yeah. So, you know, part of that origin story around next shift learning is thinking about this constant quest to what's the next thing that I need to do. I was in the social impact sector working at nonprofits and private family foundations for over a decade. I learned so much about the space, particularly around workforce development. That was the area that I honed in on. And I realized as we were working, in various jobs and functions that I had in the past, this growing need to like really improve not just like program design, like when you're building programs, like, what's the approach and how are you going to outreach to potential participants and what are they going to learn? And, how do you report that impact to funders and others? I started focusing on the learning piece because like these were first gen low income kids just like me from all types of backgrounds. And I was like, well, how do we measure learning? How do we understand if what is being delivered is actually effective? And so, early on, like towards, like 2018, 2019, I remember just having this bug around like, need to make some extra cash, like would love to like take on some consulting projects, just to like understand like how I can add value by earning a little bit more. And my fiance, who is now my wife, Tina, and full disclosure, is co-founder and COO of Next Shift Learning, really encouraged me to just like step into my power, right, and like be confident in the value that I provide. The one thing that you may not know me. Sometimes it takes a lot of encouragement from Tina and from teammates and others, like to push me there because sometimes I doubt myself. I think that's part of the imposter syndrome that I'm constantly navigating day to day. But it was through a series of like relationships that I had developed with coworkers and former coworkers, that I started to just put myself out there. Hey, like, what if I take, here's some ideas. I would brainstorm casually with them, and they're like, "Oh, those are really interesting. Can you flesh those out a little bit more?" And then it turned into like an idea for a learning experience or a program, right? First it was focused on like a boot camp, working with the LA Area Chamber of Commerce, and then Snap, the makers of Snapchat. And then it turned into a little bit of this other project and this other project. And all along, Tina kept encouraging me to like, hey, come back to the folks that you're talking to. Like, there might be more opportunities to continue to work with them. And so this concept of being in relationship with a life partner, who was like seeing everything behind the scenes, and then I started to enroll her. Hey, I don't know how to build this spreadsheet. How do I calculate the cost of this proposal? Like, what goes into a deck? And Tina at the time was management consulting, so like giving her a deck and like putting something in a spreadsheet was like very natural to her. And we started finding our complementary skills. But I think the key here around the origin story of Next Shift Learning is none of the work, particularly the early clients we started working for, could not have been possible without those like strong relationships I had built with those coworkers, who I kept coming back to just hang out. I moved to the Bay Area at some point, and every time I had a chance, I would make a visit and kind of go see folks and check in on how they're doing. And I would always follow up via email or text them like, hey, like just thinking of you, what have you been working on? And sometimes there would be impromptu calls where I would just do a brainstorm sesh right away. And so that constant going back to not just like a network of peers, but also just like even having conversations with Tina, right, around like where this was potentially going. eventually helped to build a case for, okay, I think we should establish a company that's dedicated to building learning experiences through curriculum development and structural design, right? Through managing these learning experiences where we're really looking at getting a little bit nerdy here, but we're looking at the learning sciences and we're looking to see how do we impact adult learning, right, through proven pedagogy and effective best practices for not just creating, delivering, but also measuring those experiences as well. So I'm going to pause there because I hope I was like logical, but kind of balancing like two different narratives around relationship building in the early days of next shift learning.
And no, it's very fascinating to just hear about how much family, be it from parents, be it from your life partner, has had such an influence on your professional life, whether that was introducing you again to contacts that were useful for you professionally, whether that was finding complementary skill sets between, you and your wife. And the thing that's fascinating to me there is like, when you think about a lot of professions like in the old days, right? Like husbands and wives or partners would, run a farm together. They would run the family store together, the mom and pop shop. That's like perfect example. And so I'm curious for you in the innovation economy, what is sort of the dynamic with building a company? Because I'm sure the folks listening to this know sometimes it's isolating, and sometimes you're like, I have to like focus and do all this stuff and do all these missing pieces. But what is that like going through all of those things with the person that you live with?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll say this: Tina's also first gen low income. We have similar backgrounds, values. We're from two different cultures, but like we're still able to understand that one, no one else before us has done this in our immediate families, right? Now we may have uncles or aunts who have done their own businesses, but informally, right? But the fact that we're trying to figure out how to build a sustainable and long-term business while balancing economic realities of what, not just what's going on in the economy, but also trying to figure out like HR, legal, accounting, thinking about our pricing, how we offer their services, how do we structure teams internally, a combination between full-time employees and contractors, right? To be able to build a business that really focuses on improving people's lives. So we talk about improving the economic prospects of others who we're training, but we're also talking about improving the lives of those that work with us, right? Because at the end of the day, we are creating jobs, we are creating opportunities where people can leverage their specific skill set to contribute to a mission-oriented company that is out there working with big brands locally and nationally. And Tina and I, look, we are figuring out day to day of what it's like to work together and to share those complementary like skills. How do we talk about areas around like how the business grows? And it takes a lot of work around communication. But this I feel like what we do, right, is also similar to the communication challenges oftentimes when you're working with others as well. I think the benefit that we have is we have a lot of trust because we've been together for over 13 years now, right? So we know each other, we know how we think, we know how we express ideas. There's a matter of directness that we're able to use with one another, right? To be able to like move things a little bit forward. We've had our fair share of disagreements and how to resolve that conflict. But honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better, first of all, an amazing and incredible life partner where we're also raising our almost 3-year-old, right? Son, who is a joy and then also like a big part of our lives, but like an amazing person who has just been so thoughtful, logical, and just like driven, right, to help really improve this business and take it to the next level. Like that's not possible without a co-founder like Tina. But I think that added element of us being in a relationship with each other is we're able to figure out, how do we grow together to build a company that is reflective of our values, that is reflective of what we want to see in the world together, and like the type of impact that we hope to have, and that our son, at some point when he's a lot older, is inspired by, right? So hope that answers your question.
Yes, and the thing, we've heard so many people with co-founders talk about how they think of their co-founders, whether they're related to them or not, as almost like a marriage in some sense anyway. And so to have, that actual relationship, it's really interesting to hear that dynamic and how much there are so many similarities between, again, co-founders who are just like buddies or they just met, haphazardly. So that's really interesting. Um, for my last question, I really just want to know, like, all the things you just mentioned about having to pay attention to as a founder, your HR and your employees, and figuring out all the things that go into the day to day of running a business. But then you also have to factor in networking and making those new relationships and finding those people. And so, in the grand scheme of all the things, on, raising a toddler and trying to just be an overall sane person, why does relationship building matter for you as just a person, and also for next shift learning?
Yeah. Um, I have learned to be humble enough through hard lessons in life to admit I don't know everything, and it's okay for me to not know everything. I think that is something that I am consistently reminded and humbled by when we take on new challenges in the business. Um, Oftentimes, I think um, we are afraid of the perception that people may look at us differently if we admit we just don't know what we don't know. But in reality, what I've learned is when you're vulnerable and you open up to folks, hey, I just need help. I don't know how to tackle this thing. I just need a starting point. The response to that has really allowed us at Next Shift Learning to figure out, okay, this is how it's been done one way, but like let's add our lens to this. Like now that we know how it's done, like how might we approach it slightly different? And so coming in with kind of like a newbie or new beginner's mindset really allows us to take on things that we probably would have said no to because either myself or Tina don't have a direct like knowledge base around, right? And so I think the reason why relationships matter is because there are ways that you can use your relationships in a mutual beneficial way. I want to be emphasize that where you're both teaching each other something that you probably don't know, right? And I'm always really cognizant of offering how can I be of service to you, or how can I help you in the future? It doesn't matter if it's then and there, but like in a few months or even a couple years later, if I get an email or text, like I'm always sure, right, to set up 30 minutes, an hour, whatever is needed, right, to make sure that I'm able to return that knowledge sharing that was once something that we leveraged in our relationship. So I think that's ultimately why I think relationships matter is because it's an opportunity to like learn from one another, and especially like given just the fact that while we're trying to close social capital gaps of access to knowledge, right? There's the gaps that we're trying to close from a co-founder perspective, right? It's the only way we can build in community, and it's the only way that we know works well for us, right? Is really leaning into our lived experiences and leaning into the lived experiences of those of our team and those that we collaborate as independent contractors, right? Who are here building each and every day with us 365 days of the year, but like obviously we take time for holidays and making space for that. But it's really an opportunity to just like bring in that shared knowledge and expertise and figuring out, okay, where do we go from here and what's possible.
I love that. Relationship building as an educational tool. The things
Yes.
you don't think about when you're like actually doing it. Very cool. So, if people wanted to learn more about what it is that you do, wanted to reach out and learn more about you, what would be some of the best ways for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, the best way to contact us is you can reach out to me or Tina. So, Sergio at nextshiftlearning.com, Tina at nextshiftlearning.com. You can visit our website, www.nextshiftlearning.com. There's also like a form there. If you're browsing and you want to drop us a note, we see those come into our inbox, or on socials. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram primarily, so you can find us via those chats and send us a DM.
Very cool. Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. These were definitely some gems. Again, whether or not you are formally married to whoever you're building your brand with, you're not just doing it alone. And for folks listening, I'm sure that something resonated with them as far as communicating, humbling oneself to being cool, not knowing everything, and finding the folks who might. And so, again, really appreciate you taking the time today. And thank you for listening to this episode of Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. As our Goody Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Take it easy.